Do I need to create a team charter? Do I need to sit down with one of my teams and create a team charter? If your boss was to go and ask everybody on the team, what is it that they do and what is it they're responsible for? How do they know they're successful? If you feel confident they're all going to give the same answer, you don't need one. You're good.
I would argue that you always need one, though. I would argue the point where even if everybody would say the same thing, you still need it to remind yourself of that.
Welcome to Tech Council, your go-to podcast for mastering the art of building in the enterprise world. Join hosts Duncan Mapes and Jason Ehmke as they unpack the strategies, tools, and insights you need to drive innovation at scale. Brought to you by DevGrid, we're here to empower developers, tech leaders, and enterprise builders. Hit subscribe, and let's dive into today's episode.
All right, we're back up. We got, June 24th? I don't even know. I've lost track of how many episodes. This is 8 or 9 or something.
Something like that.
Where it's getting wild, but we're sneaking one in as the holidays hit in the summer. We got to get the kids to the beach and things. We got people waiting on us, but they get to wait a few more minutes, and because we have a conversation that we've been meaning to have for a while. So I think it's good to we're going to talk about team charters.
It's important.
Why don't you lead us off there and tell us what your experience with team charters is, and we'll go from there.
My experience with team charters is a lot of times they're non-existent, and you might take over a team. You might be brought into a team, and the team is operating within their own guardrails, their own ruts in the trail, and they just keep going with the status quo. But if people don't know what they're doing, if they don't know why they're there, you're just not going to be as effective as you should be. And I say should intentionally because a lot of times the teams are kind of floating around, meandering with, why are we operating here? What do we do? What's our purpose?
And you were talking about like a really good point around why to put the charters in place, right? And why is it important? So let's back up a little bit and say, okay, what do we mean when we say a team charter, right? And to kind of build on your point, it is a mission statement, or I always use the terminology. It's like the constitution for a team, right? It's the framework by which you're going to then do your business, right? And so it's one of those things where it sounds super kind of consultanty and like, oh, it's a framework for a team structure and all. It sounds really cheesy and kind of, like something you might have done in the 70s or 80s, coming out of a business school or something.
But there is a reason those things exist, though. A lot of times, they start for a good purpose, and then they get pulled and stretched, and now you've got a McKinsey consultant that's saying you should have a team charter. The reality is, a lot of that is built off of a good effort to give direction, but it just gets kind of taken out of context at times.
Yeah. I mean, but to your point, right? And we've talked about it a lot in different contexts, in the podcast around these engineering teams, especially for horizontal teams. And what do we mean by horizontal? Like teams that aren't delivering specific applications, like business applications. They might be a support team. They might be doing DevOps work, SREs, maybe like a cloud engineering or something along those lines. Teams that are responsible for horizontal functions where they're supporting other teams are definitely ones that should have charters. In fact, the first charter I ever wrote was it was kind of opposition research, right? Like from the political, like, because I was having my boss sent me on a I don't know what you would call it, a corporate witch hunt almost, but witch hunt's not the right way to describe it. But basically, we were having this trouble with this one team. They were supposed to be supporting us in this very specific way, and they weren't. And so basically, what we ended up doing was we sat down and we said, okay, well, how do we tell these people that they're failing us as their customer, that they're failing us in a way that is productive, right? And so what I ended up doing was essentially writing out a charter. Like, if you were good, if I ran your team and I was going to write a 1 or 2 page document that outlined all of the things that you're responsible for and, kind of your success criteria and all the different things that make up a charter, what would that look like? And so I sat down and wrote that out and gave it to them. And I said, hey guys, like, this is what I think you should be for us. What is that? Does that resonate? Do you agree with this? Are we completely off base and all those different things? So it actually helped unstick a conversation because it put words around the core responsibilities, right? Like, to your point, these, McKinsey consultants or whatever come in and create these racy frameworks and team charters and all these different things that sound fake, but actually they're really, really important in these organizational dynamics, because as organizations get bigger and bigger and people turn over, and like, why does this team even exist is a question that people don't ask enough, at least, right? Like, they've been there forever. They can kind of continue to get funded, and like they drift, right?
Yeah, even with the feature teams, back in days of the banks, I took over a team, and there were a lot of problems at that time. There was a lot of containers were failing or APIs were failing, and everybody would pass the buck of, no, I'm just a proxy, and then they'd pass it to somebody else who was just a proxy, and then you'd have to coordinate with the vendor to figure out what was going on. But then telling people, here's your mission, here's your charter, here's why you're here, here's why we're all here in support of this. It helps people see, like, oh, I am not just a proxy in that context. I am not just a pass through to something else. I have responsibilities here. This is why we're here. And so now it also gives people direction of how I should operate within my team. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to talk about why these are important, because a lot of times you have a new developer coming in to a team, or you have an old guard of a team, and they don't really know why we're here. Like, what do we do? It just kind of, it's the day to day. It gets very mundane. Everybody forgets it. They just start working, and then it starts to chip away at everybody. Like, they all come in with a good, and they're very ambitious. They want to do the right thing, but then they starts to erode and chip and chip and chip. And we don't have a reminder of, this is why you're operating here. This is why your team exists. These are the best practices for us. Eventually, everybody's the same team, and they all just, I'm just a proxy. And now everybody's just a proxy. So, no,
it's like a job description for the team almost, right? Like it's like, whether it's the vertical or the horizontals have to have it, in my estimate. Like, the necessity is much higher because they have to serve 1,000 masters literally, and they need that guidance. But to your point, a vertical delivery team can use it as well. And vertical delivery team is going to have even broader documents, right? Like, you're talking about, like, you kind of have an organizing document that is a charter. It's like, here's what we do, here's what we care about, here's why we're here. Like, that's kind of the high level, we'll get into the details of what a charter is, but that's kind of what a charter is. And then you're kind of talking about, like, hey, here's the things we're responsible, here's the apps we own, here's what that means, here's our definition of done, like all these other organizing documents that are really important for the app team as well.
It's less than that too, but it's also, each team has a function. A vertical team will have a function, and they're there for a reason. You might have teams that could be considered a horizontal, but they're a vertical, but they still have a mission. And so, can I give you an example of a team where everybody was complaining about how, well, we're always getting thrown around. We always have to reprioritize our work to do this. I said, yeah, that's why we're here. You realize that's why we exist here, is so that we're a highly scalable, and we can pivot on a dime to fix something or add something that nobody else can. And reframing it to say, oh yeah, it's chaos, but managing chaos and making sure that you can do these things the right way. That's part of our existence, so that those other teams who might not be able to, it's a much more complex system. Ours is built in a way that is less complex, so that we can pivot, and that's our responsibility. Reframing it that way actually helps people see that, oh yeah, okay, I'll just learn to be a better firefighter.
It's blocking and tackling level leadership, right? It's giving people a clear definition of what it is they're doing and why. And it's one of those funny, we've done it for our own teams. We do it as part of our advisory services for other companies. And it's so funny, every single time, inevitably especially with like engineers, individual contributor level engineers, inevitably there's this like arc of like, oh, this is such a waste of time. I can't believe you're making us do this. This is so elementary, blah, blah.
Just engaging conversations. They're
yes.
great.
By the end, they're obsessed with it. And it's like, And it's like this thing where because it also forces really powerful conversations, right? And we've seen this in some of our customers where we get into those conversations and you realize they don't know like some of these
But they
things,
want
right?
to know. They really
Yeah,
want to know.
but it's like there's ambiguity. Like
Yeah.
there's ambiguity. Like what is our responsibility here? Like where does the line end and where does the line? Like what are the boundaries around our space, right?
Like you find there's nobody working on something. You're like, oh, okay, well we need to solve that because nobody's doing it.
Yeah. Like we were working with this one platform team and the conversation kept maturing to the place where they realized, oh, there's this big responsibility that no one has right now. And it's just getting dropped. And it's like, we got to take that on. And that type of thing starts, because the intentionality hadn't happened prior, they'd never really kind of conceptualized and realized that. But so it creates a nice framework. It's a really good thing to do, if you're asking yourself the question of, should I, do I need to create a team charter? Do I need to sit down with one of my teams and create a team charter? I mean, I think the questions you would ask yourself, and I'm interested if you have any others, but like the questions you would ask yourself is like, if your boss was to go and ask everybody on the team, what is it that they do and what is it they're responsible for and how do they know they're successful? If you feel confident they're all going to give the same answer, you don't need one. You're good. I wouldn't feel, unless you've done this exercise, unless you've trained people, unless you've all gotten in alignment as to what it is, that's very unlikely to be a high fidelity thing.
I would argue that you'd always need one, though. I would argue the point where even if everybody would say the same thing, you still need it to remind yourself of that because I've seen it countless times where
I don't think it's possible that everybody would say the same thing without it, right? Like so it's like it's such a weird situation.
There's always times where that changes, where you get into a big project, a massive initiative, and of course the line's blur there, right? You sometimes, well, oftentimes, or almost always, you'll do something that's not your responsibility because there's timing. It's tech debt. It's the other things that, hey, we wouldn't normally do this, but we're going to do it here because if we do it, it's a week of work. If somebody else does it, it's 10 weeks of work. So we're just going to do that for the timeline. So you can chip away at your direction. So, but afterwards, you need to start cleaning that up. You need to look at what are we doing that we shouldn't be doing. And so then having that charter lets you say, okay, yeah, you know what? Here's some things that we should give back to the other team because now we shouldn't be doing that anymore.
So that's interesting. So you're essentially framing it as like almost like it's like a best practice to organizational debt in some ways, right? Like you're getting like it's something to sort of measure your ideal against. So if you're doing stuff that's outside of that core responsibility, having it as a nice way to say, okay, hey, we got a little bit out of our lane there. Like maybe it needed to happen, but let's recorrect. So you're saying it's a great course correcting type of things.
It is as well, right? Because that's how we would kind of zoom out a little bit and say, okay, well, here's our charter, right? Why are we here? What are we doing? Okay, we did a lot of stuff that we wouldn't normally do. Okay, that's not great, but now we have time to either clean it up or work with somebody else and start to say, okay, hey, we did this for the timing. Now it's your job to take that back over because we shouldn't be doing that anymore. That's one use case for it. It's not the only, clearly, but it helps people say, all right, let's get back to basics here. Let's get back to what we're really good at and move off the things that we shouldn't be doing because those are things that weigh you down.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully agree with what you're saying in terms of like, I think it doesn't, the fit with a vertical team is interesting. Like you're advocating really strongly for like a vertical team and you like doing this work and those things type of things. I don't think it's a problem. I think the more clarity you provide to your team as to who they are and what they do and why they do it is always a positive thing. So there's nothing wrong with doing it. It feels like a very different thing though. And the reason I say that is just because application, the nature of what we would call vertical delivery teams, their KPIs and their responsibilities are so ephemeral, right? Potentially, right? Like they can change from month to month, quarter to quarter, depending on the priorities, right? Like especially in an agile world where things are shifting around. Like maybe they own applications, maybe they don't. Maybe they're just an assembly line for work in an enterprise. So that's, I call it out to say like, not that anything you're saying is wrong, but to say like, it doesn't necessarily fit other than you can always provide clarity is always a good thing, right? Like, so that's always positive, but
I've had a lot of success having the charter in place for a vertical delivery team because it can get very ambiguous of what they're responsible for. And the people will always try to tell you to do things that aren't your responsibility.
So I'm going to argue with you some more because it's fun. So like I would argue that particular, because I'm thinking of Cappy, right? Like that's what you're talking about largely. Yeah. So that I would argue that's actually a horizontal team, right? Like, I mean, even though you're vertical delivery in a lot of ways, the reason you had that.
That's kind of my point is that it is a vertical delivery team, but it kind of towed the line of both, right? It's not exactly one vertical, but it's not exactly a platform. It kind of sits in the middle somewhere.
Yeah. So that is a good example of your operating model was that of a vertical delivery team, but really you were a platform team and really you were a horizontal team. And so therefore you needed the charter to keep you in the right boundaries and not out spreading and doing everybody else's job for them.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes, because it's easy to do.
It's fun on some of these things because we do come at them from very different perspectives, right? Like I have a much more horizontal orientation just from my time. Like I not that I haven't done vertical delivery, but in some of the leadership positions I've been in, and certainly recently, been much more kind of horizontally oriented. And then obviously you've been doing both, but like we both have done both, but I think you're more vertically oriented and scaling teams in that regard. So it's good to keep me in check to sort of advocate for that. So cool. All right. What else do we got here? So we talked about when you need one. We basically said all the time. So how do we do that? So we've spent 15 minutes or so talking somebody into, okay, you need a charter. How would we go about doing that? Like, what are the steps? What are the pieces? Like, if we're gonna help somebody, if somebody's wanted to walk away from this with a takeaway, how would they do that?
Well, okay, so you've created charters for a lot of different teams, right? You've seen different platform teams. You've got a ton of experience with horizontal teams, and as you said, that there's a lot of benefit there because they can get to the point where they could own apps, they might not own apps, and so they're just not really oriented in the direction to deliver an effective platform. So when you've come in and you say, okay, this horizontal team, y'all need some help, where have you started with that?
It's a good question. I think, every situation is different, and also it depends on, are you on the team? Are you an extended leader above the team? Are you, in some of our cases, as an outside consultant helping a team do it? I think fundamentally you have to sort of the first step is sort of sitting down with the team and explaining what it is you want to do, right? Like you want to create kind of this conversation we're having. Okay, we want to create a document that outlines who we are and what we do effectively, right? And why we do it. Like that's essentially, it should be a page or two. It should not be this giant thing. It should be mostly bullet points. However you want to do it is up to you. And I tell this to the team, there's no hard and fast rules. It's up to you to choose your own adventure. But largely that's the point. It's like, okay, like, and if I was going to give somebody, a starting place, I would say, hey, you need a mission statement. And I would say this should be a narrative. You want a paragraph or two that kind of says the narrative version of why do you exist? What do you do? A couple of sentences, maybe 4 or 5 sentences. If depending on the type of team, you might also address who you are, right? So, and this is something I found useful when you're making a transformation, especially as a new leader. If you're like, maybe, for example, a good example would be something like maybe you were doing production operations before, and now you want to transition to being an SRE team, right? So you might call out explicitly what an SRE engineer is, right? Not a full job description, but like a sentence or two that kind of articulates the distinction of you're transitioning from someone who is doing this job. That's a very different job. We're transitioning over to this other thing, this other persona. That can be something that's worth calling out. The next main section I would say is, what are your key responsibilities? List out the things you're responsible for. This is what you're getting at with like your app teams, and we're responsible for this domain or this whatever it is, and just list those things out. It should be pretty obvious for the platform that you own or whatever the thing is. It's like, if you're SRE team, you're responsible for things like, the overall stability of the platform and different things like that, right? Like there's all kinds of, it depends on your space and depends on your team, but like, again, bullet points, they don't have to be, super long, like could be a half of a sentence, 4 or 5 core duties and areas of focus.
So this could feel like very top down for some people who like on the receiving end of this. So you got a new leader coming in and they say, going to put some team charters together. We're very much shortcutting that conversation, of course, but there could be some individuals who say, who are you to tell me what I'm doing? This is what we've been doing forever. And how do you balance that with the team and say, no, this is what you should have been doing all along without disparaging their previous leadership, because that can be tough.
It's rare that I've done it with people that had been my team for a while. It's usually either I just absorbed something, we just stood something up, or we're coming in from the outside to help. And the advice I would give is, no, this is for you guys. Like, you don't dictate what it is. This is for us to self-proclaim what it is, right? Like, what is it that we do? What are our responsibilities from our perspective? It's like one of the pieces of advice I always remember was someone said something to the effect of like, it's much better to tell someone how you want to be measured than let them define it for you, right? It's the same kind of idea. It's like, how do we, so you go to the team, you're like, well, this is who we are. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's figure out let's flush that out. And then, I mean, we'll get to it, but like later on, you got to get buy-in from your stakeholders and peers and all those different things. So you got to make sure it's going to be in line with what they agree with. But I don't think it shouldn't be confrontational. If it's confrontational, you're doing it wrong, or you've got some problem people on the team, I would say. It should, the only thing that should feel top down is the exercise happening at all. Everything else should be, you are pulling the team's belief about themselves out onto the table so that you can then coalesce it together and have a single vision for what the team is.
And what if you disagree with that though? Like there's times where I've seen where I've come into a team and tried to reset and realign because I have a vision for the team that I know needs to happen. I've inherited a team where I could see the direction that they're going with how they were operating was going to self-destruct within the matter of months. And so, how do you balance that where you need to push something like, no, you need to operate like this. You can't tell them or else the team is going to get disbanded. But how do you make sure that the team says, oh yeah, I see your vision. That's better than what we think we are, without a mutiny on your hands? Because it can happen.
It can and it has. I mean, I had that explicitly happen when we were, changing some technical strategies around a platform team, which we'll get into next week. Little plug. But I think the answer, any kind of change management, right? Like, again, to use the kind of cliche corporate word, I think you have to hear the person out, right? And then you just have to figure out, is there a way to come into alignment? And if there isn't, then at some point you have to let the person know, well, this isn't actually your call, right? Like, and if it's the whole team, I mean, that's obviously bad if you have a full-blown mutiny. But at some point, like, there has to be a reconciliation between the people that are paying for the team and what they want from it and what the team wants to do, right? Like, those things can't be in conflict indefinitely, right? That just won't happen because the money they'll just turn off the money and those people will go away. Like, that's just, not to be crass about it, but that's what will happen.
Well, you can't tell the people that. You can't tell them that. So you kind of got to push the thumb a little bit. Like, it's kind of like the last straw, though, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say what I would say in those moments. Like, it depends on the relationship with the person. Depends on how obstinate they're being. There's very few situations that I've been in personally where people are so unwilling to move at all and unwilling to have a conversation about, like, where are we going? And, you can reference direction or strategic direction that's come from above if there is something, right? Like, just like an easy example would be something like, we're going from on-prem to cloud, right? So now we get instead of being, this team that supports a bunch of OpenShift clusters, we now need to become like a cloud engineering team, right? but you got a bunch of like very hardcore Kubernetes and OpenShift fanboys on the team. They don't want to do it, right? Like that would be a scenario where this type of thing could happen, right? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a strategic direction shift that, like, on the what I would say to those people. First of all, I wouldn't let it get too confrontational in the room, like in the group. But I would say, well, let's pause on this conversation, and maybe we can have some, we'll talk offline, and maybe we'll come back and have this. Because by the way, we're going to get into it, but like, you don't need to try and do this in one setting. In fact, in one sitting, you should not. Right? Like when we set this up,
it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like you want this to marinate with people. Like it's like if Congress was really functional, how they would write laws. Right? It's the same kind of idea, right? It's like somebody like you say, okay, what's the goal? What is the goal? Everybody align on the goal. The goal is that we have a clear picture of what it is. Okay, cool. And you basically do a brain dump of that. Like what are all the responsibilities? Key principles and practices. What are the important things we want to call out, right? Like in SRE, you would say stuff like, oh yeah, blame is postmortem. That's really important to us, or something like some kind of, really important stuff that you want to do. Toil reduction, right? Like you want to call out ideas that are important to you. You also need to name your constituents and stakeholders. It's a really important thing, especially in the horizontals. Verticals have them too. Obviously, they're just more obvious in a vertical situation. In the horizontal situation, it's really important to call it out. Who matters to us? Who are the people that we need to serve and or get buy-in from? Call that out, put it on paper. And then success criteria. They can be KPIs, they can be numbers, they could be qualitative things, whatever. It depends on the team, depends on the organization, but you need to have success criteria. How do you know you're being successful? There's fewer incidents, the team velocity is, vertical delivery velocity is up. There's fewer security breaches. Whatever it is that matters to your team, you need some distinct measurement. And again, it doesn't have to necessarily be numerical measurement. It can be qualitative. And a lot of those horizontal teams will do NPS style things. Like we'll do surveys of our constituents to see what they think. That's part of the success criteria. That's usually the hardest part, actually, is the success criteria, because that's also kind of where the rubber meets the road, right?
And sometimes that gets a little bit fluffy. They kind of they kind of shy away from it at times. Where I came in where I was trying to question, like I knew the team wasn't delivering on things that were productive, like you said. The average velocity going up of other teams, or the usage of the tools that they're building. And so I said, okay, well, how many people are using the tools that you're building? 1. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. And so it really helps them see, like, oh yeah, maybe we're not being very successful because we don't have many consumers. And say, okay, let's put some of that. You don't have adoption. And so, but they were so dead set in saying, this is how we operate. This is what we do. Okay. How many people are you helping? 1.
No, it's a thing. It's a thing. So those are the kind of the pieces, right? And back to your question around, like, if somebody's being really difficult, what I would, and again, your mileage may vary, depends on your personality, depends on your managerial style. For me, what I would probably do is try to de-escalate the conversation in the room, pause, ask everybody to think about it, and then I'd probably pull those people aside. If it's a small group, I might talk to them together. If it's a bigger group, I'll probably grab people individually or just grab them individually and just chat and be like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, what's really the issue, right? Like, and if it's, I don't want to go away from Kubernetes. I don't want to move to serverless. I want to use Kubernetes, like, whatever. It's like, okay, well, I get that. Like, you have this preference. You've invested a lot in becoming an expert in that. But this is where our direction is going as an organization, and we got to support that. So how would you like me to help you, right? Like, let's talk about you as a person and your career and what's going to make you happier and the most successful. Do you want me to help you find another job within the company? Like, maybe there's these guys over here are still going to stay on the Kubernetes world. Would you rather be on that team? Do you want to talk about that? Should I make some calls, find you a gig out in market? Like, what would you like? That's usually how I would tackle that. If they're being complete jerks, that's a different thing. And I've seen that. And then it's just like, all right, I'll still make those offers, maybe sort of half-heartedly, but that's really what I would say is like, hey, this is the strategy that we need to support, and whether I had a say in the strategy or not is kind of irrelevant at that moment, right? And it's like, we're going to cloud, we're going cloud native. Maybe we're not doing the OpenShift thing anymore. Like, we got to get on board with that. So either you got to get on board with that or you got to go find something else to do. Like, I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, and that's kind of the conversation. And I don't know if you would handle that much differently, but that's sort of how I would.
No, I mean, they're pretty much the same. It's usually been less confrontational for me, where I was able to find those individuals a spot on another one of my teams, because it kind of loosened some rust up a little bit, and say, well, maybe it's not the direction of the team that I don't like. Maybe I'm just restless in general, and I'm working on these things that I want to work on because that's just scratching the itch for now. But in reality, I'm actually not happy with my job. So can you find me something else? And they thrive. I moved a few people around, and they absolutely thrived in their new roles because they just were, I don't want to say bored, but complacent with what they were working on. And it wasn't as fulfilling as it could be.
I was going to say, that reminds me of this thing Simon Sinek says, right? Like, he says, if the reaction is above a 5, it's not about the thing they're reacting to, right? Like, it's like, and so whether in work or your relationships or whatever, right? Like, the example that I've just recently seen that's stuck in my head is like, your significant other yells at you because you left the cap off the toothpaste. It's like, this is not a big deal. Why are you making such a big deal about it? Clearly, it's not about the toothpaste, right? Like, so to your point, like on these types of things, if they're freaking out, it's probably not about the tech, right? It's probably not about the strategy or the charter. It's something else that this is just triggering it. Now, sometimes it can be like, literally, you're making a big technology shift. I mean, the biggest, most obvious one was going from native development to React Native development. Like, that was a very real line in the sand for a lot of engineers. But usually it's not that. It's what you're talking about. There's some other dissatisfaction that you just have to try to drain the energy from. Like, don't let it infect the whole room. And take them into a private setting so you can really have that conversation. You can say, hey, like, what's up? And really get into it with them and let them vent and then find out what the real issue is, right?
Well, this can go not just your team though, right? Because your team, you've got to get them on the same page, but that's one of the parts of this. But now you've got to go sell this to other people, because now you've got your team aligned to where you think, but now you've got other people, you've got stakeholders, you've got other people who are paying the bill for this team. You've got a lot of others that you now have to convince of this team. And so that's tough, right? Because it's sometimes the rest of the organization doesn't love the direction, because, there's plenty of reasons for that. Like, how have you solved that in the past?
Well, it's a good call. I mean, I think it's worth actually restating. I think one of the reasons why you do these charters, it's good for your team, but it's also really good to defend your team, right? Like, so when the time comes, inevitably in the budget cycle or whatever it is, like, here's what we do, here's why we do it, here's our success criteria, and here's our metrics against that success criteria. Like, having that formalized already for when inevitably, some executive 3 levels away from you is like, okay, why does this team cost $3 million a year or whatever the number is? Being able to have that answered already and having good buy-in across your whole constituency is a great way to keep your team funded, which is an important thing. So, but you're right? Like, you're standing up a new function or formalizing it. It's not like, if we go through the steps involved of doing it, right? Like, what we generally do is we have a kickoff meeting with everybody. What I would generally do is I'd have a kickoff meeting, and I would say, okay, I'd explain what we're doing, what the parameters are, and then ask questions. We basically kind of, want to use a mural board or some other mind mapping or whatever, something to dump ideas on the board, and just brain dump from the team the different sections. You might just have a doc that everybody has access to, whatever it is. And you just get a bunch of content, and that would be like the first step. And then what I would do is I would come back a week later. I would let that sit for a week and like tell everybody, go look at it. If you have any other ideas, throw them in there or whatever. And then in the next session, I would essentially force an editing process, right? So coming out of that session, you want to draft, right? So you have your first draft that's just brain dump. After your second session, you should have what we would call an internal RFC, right? So your first, first version of the draft that's pretty decent. At least it's got complete sentences where appropriate and redundancies, like things have been kind of pulled together. And then you snap the line, you call it R1, and you say, okay, everybody needs to review this over the next week. We're going to come back in another week, and we're going to finalize our draft, right? So you have a week to provide feedback. And then at the end of that process, so after that week, you then...
But those can get kind of contentious at times, though, because I've seen when we've had these conversations, and I think the most common objection is, well, that's our job. That's what we do. That's my team's responsibility.
Hey, I'm getting there. So let me get there first. So I want to get the team aligned first, right? So we get to a version. And then the next step is, once you're at that V1, then you have to start talking to all of your peer teams, your consult, like all the stakeholders effectively. And then you put a draft in front of them and you ask for input from them, right? And that process, to your point, can be contentious, right? Because especially if you're standing up something new that takes accountability or responsibility either away from a team or kind of layers your accountability on top, right? I'll give you an example. Would be something like, I don't know, like SRE. We'll just keep using SRE as an example, right? So SRE might be, you might say, okay, hey, we're now accountable for, the reliability of your application, or we're going to give you, this is a bad example, but we're going to give you, feedback on we're going to define the production readiness of your application. Like maybe that's an example of one of the key responsibilities is to measure the production readiness of an application. Well, maybe there's application teams that don't like that, right? Now they're probably silly because they should invite that. But if they're in a bad culture or they've been kind of picked on or whatever, they might resist that, right? So, in that case, obviously you have to negotiate it out as best you can, but then ultimately it comes down to your common leadership. Hey, what have you tasked me to do? Like, what is the team? Like, there's a contention here where we're scoring applications for production and they don't like that we're doing that. Which would you prefer? Would you prefer that to happen with them or prefer that happen with us? Like, that's generally, I haven't actually had that come to a head. That type of stuff usually works itself out.
They work out easily. I mean, those are easy to, and it's typically pretty welcoming, especially with the SRE and app teams. It's typically
that's probably a bad example.
Thank goodness you're helping us.
Yeah, exactly.
We need it.
No, you probably mean more like.
I mean more like outside teams, right? There's two.
Yeah.
You and another individual at the big boys or girls table, and it's like to the SRE. I think this makes sense in the SRE is that there could be another group that's more of an enterprise. They're the watchdogs or the monitoring, and so then you have an SRE team that's going to have deeper knowledge of the applications, but this other team could say no, that's our job to monitor applications. We do that because that's a real thing. We've had this conversation before.
An even better example of that, which it's exactly what you're talking about, was a situation where we were standing up an SRE practice, and it's kind of related to the story I told earlier about the charter for the external team. We were standing up an SRE practice, and we came to the conclusion that our observability tools weren't good enough, right? There was an enterprise observability team that was responsible for the enterprise observability platform, and we were effectively putting our finger in their eye and saying, the platform you're providing is not sufficient. We're going to go buy our own. Which, for the record, I don't recommend. Generally speaking, using enterprise tools is absolutely the easiest and best and most cost-efficient thing to do. If you are in a situation where it's bad enough that you actually do have to do that, that's unfortunate, and obviously sometimes you do have to do that, but most of the time you don't actually have to, and you're going to be better off just using the enterprise platform. But in our case, we were cowboys and pirates and all the other metaphors, and we really went for it, and so that caused years of contention, right? To your point, like because we were creating essentially a shadow observability platform, because not only do we have our own SRE practice, which was not controversial, we were standing up observability tools that was extremely controversial, and so like in that case, it never really got resolved. It was a constant fight. until people left the company, and then the narrative changed, right? Like the narrative was this really messy thing, and we saw the world very, very differently from the two perspectives, and there was two very, very different stories being told. From my perspective, the other team was not even in the same reality, let alone being like just different perspectives. And I'm sure that's the same way they felt about us. And so, it was just messy until eventually it resolved itself, because certain people left the company, voluntarily. They had other opportunities. And then as a new leader came in, they were able to reconcile with us and work together towards a unified strategy. That one was really messy. That was unfortunate. I wish we could have handled that better. I'm not quite sure how we could have. I don't actually have any insights looking back, but I know that it was regrettable the way it went down. But sometimes that's just going to be the situation. You're going to fight. If it's unreconcilable, sometimes it's okay to be unreconcilable. It's just the status quo is just messy.
You don't have to. Not everybody has to like you. That's the thing.
Yeah.
If everybody likes you of these things, you're failing.
Well, sometimes, right? Like, I mean, actually, I have to be careful.
That's a whole other conversation.
I personify that a little bit too much sometimes, but like, what I would say that another way to say that, like, stand up for what you believe in, regardless of whether or not it's going to make people upset with you, right? Like, and that's good stuff for life. But even in a corporate environment, the amount of poor decision making due to people trying to not upset people, other people is shocking, right? And so
that's where the charters can help with that, though. That can help those conversations, because you can kind of, I guess, metaphorically duke it out a little bit and make sure that you're really speaking the same terms, though. If it's not confronted, then sometimes people don't realize what really matters, and so we can help dig that out too.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's organizing humans. It's very complicated. It's very hard. We're not evolutionarily designed to work in groups of thousands and thousands of people, and certainly not over long periods of time, right? Like, and so it's really, really hard to do it well. And the more structure you can put around it, with a narrative like the charter, the better chance you have, because again, we get to the last part of the process, right? So we go through, we get the team to align, and then essentially you send it out for wider distribution. You say, okay, here, I want an RFC, request for comment, of anyone who's relevant, effectively, right? Like, you're not trying to be elitist about it, but just like, you don't necessarily want to invite it to the whole company, but like to the people that are going to care or have an opinion, you want to get their feedback, or at least give them the opportunity for feedback.
You can get the wrong opinions on these things, and then it can derail the entire process. If you have the wrong person, they're going to, for some reason, they want to be relevant to the conversation. They're going to torpedo the entire thing.
Yeah. So you have to have some judgment there, but for the most part, it should be relatively straightforward. It's all the people you mentioned, your stakeholders, basically, and your leadership, and maybe your peers, and all those things. And what you're getting them to do is essentially think of it as a treaty, right? It's like a trade deal or something like that. You're getting them to ratify, yes, this is who you are to us as well. We agree. This is how we're going to now interface with you. It's like almost like a contract, right? And so that process can be smooth. Usually is, because, to be fair, most people don't even bother to read it, if we're honest, right? They don't care enough to actually do it, but they're going to acquiesce by default, right? They're going to, if they have their opportunity, if they don't speak up, then they've essentially said, yep, we're good. So that's generally what happens. People are like, oh, this is interesting. You put some thought into this. Cool. They might have one nitpicky point or whatever, but generally speaking, people are just going to be thrilled that somebody's being proactive and being thoughtful about what the responsibilities are. And they're like, oh, maybe we should do something like this. Like, that's generally the reaction you're going to get.
And that's what I've seen too, is that they say, oh, cool. Like, and it starts to kind of spread. It's the good virus. It spreads out to other groups, and they start to ratify their own, and it starts to have some really good conversations. It sounds like it wouldn't, but it absolutely does.
I know, it's the most cheesy thing in the world. I remember the last time I proposed it to a customer, I was like, bear with me. like I know this sounds ridiculous, but it is super useful, and it's forcing it's like a budget. It's like a budget meeting in your family, right? Like it forces conversations about priorities and what you're really doing. Like how you're going to spend your money, how you're going to spend your time, all those different things. It forces the right conversations that maybe wouldn't happen on a day-to-day basis, right? And then it codifies it. And then again, now you've given your team something to come back to, and you've given people something for people to hold you accountable to. And it's like, I use the Constitution as kind of the main thing. It's like, it's not all the laws, it's not all the statutes, it's not every little detail. You shouldn't go to that level.
If you do, you're too low level. If you're so specific, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. If you think about like the American Constitution, flawed as it may be, like it's very broad, it's very high level. It's more about like what you can't do, which is kind of cool. But it's not trying to get into, okay, the speed limit is this on this road of this type in this city, right? Like that's not the job of this type of a thing. The job is to state principles and to state the people that are important and the constituencies that are important and how you think about yourself. And if you do that, and if you can get your whole team aligned, which you should be able to do, and if you lead the conversation properly, you should be able to do that. And then you get all your stakeholders aligned, man, that's more alignment than most people get in years. And it's, the way we design it takes about 4 weeks. It doesn't need to take that long, but we generally do that so as to not rush it and to give people a sense of, okay, I've thought about this, I'm good.
It takes time. It takes time for people to really digest it, and then it just kind of sits there subconsciously, works away, and then they come back a week later and have some good positive feedback for it.
It takes calendar days. It takes a lot of calendar days, but not a lot of time, like effort. It's more like, to your point, you just said it exactly. It's the background processing in your mind of just letting you think about it. For those that are interested in it.
It's not like something that you can snap judgment on and say, this is what we do. This is like, people have to think about it. They have to go through the day to day and say, it kind of raises the right questions in everybody's minds of, I am doing something. Should I even do this? Is this what and then they realize like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this. Oh, go and put it on the charter and talk to Duncan or whoever else and say.
The number of times where you have the kickoff, and in the week between the kickoff and your first draft, it completely changes everybody's perspective on their work. You're like, they come back in with all this excitement and opinion and like additional data that they want to churn through and talk through in scenarios and all these different things. It's exactly that. That's why we stagger it.
They don't think about that as a day to day. It just gets very into the flow of it. It just gets those wagon wheel trails. They're just there, but then when you tell people you've got wagon wheel trails that you've been working in, should you be going down this path?
We call those ruts.
Yes. Thank you. But I'm making a point. The point I'm saying is that your cart is going to go on these, and
no, exactly.
You don't realize they're there until you start to kind of see. Oh, I'm.
Yeah, if you try to turn, you realize, oh shoot, we're stuck. Yeah. No. It's really good. It's a really good call out, and I think it's. We encourage everybody to take a look at them, try to build them for yourselves. If you need help with them, not that we're trying to sell you anything, like we've got templates and stuff. We'll put them out. Shoot us an email if we'd love to hear about, you go to hello@devgrid.io. We'd love to hear if you're building them, what your experience is like. I don't know, anything else, Jason, to add to team charters?
Team charters, great idea if done right. But even if it's something, even done slightly okay, is better than where you are.
Yeah, good call.
It's a start, because it can evolve. It doesn't have to be set in stone forever.
That's a great point we didn't mention. These things, it's not permanent. It's permanent until it's not. Like, you can always change it. And so you have to say, well, what about a year from now? Or what about 2 years from now? We don't want to be pigeonholed in this way. It's why you're not super specific. You be specific enough that it's meaningful, but not specific enough that you don't have room to evolve. And then 2, you can always change it. You can always version it. It's not a big deal. It's okay. All you do is get the same agreement. Like, hey, we're adding this responsibility. We're taking away this responsibility. We're adding this success criteria. We're taking away this success criteria. Whatever. That's okay. Like, that part of it, that evolution is natural and healthy.
It should be doing that. It should be happening.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Good call. Thank you. We'll talk to you guys later, Jason. Enjoy your time. And all right. See you guys.
See y'all later.
That's a wrap for this episode of Tech Council, brought to you by DevGrid. Thanks for joining us as we dive into building smarter solutions for the enterprise. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, leave us a rating, and share your thoughts on X, at DevGrid Inc., or at devgrid.io. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll explore more ways to thrive in the enterprise. Until then, keep building.